Hey guys, I'm back with a new video. In this video, let us learn about JSX. JSX stands for JavaScript XML. So whatever we wrote in our first component in the previous video was neither a string nor HTML code. Though it does look like HTML, but it is not. It is a syntax extension to JavaScript. With JSX, you are able to write code inside React, and there is a lot that goes under the hood to make it possible. With JSX, you can leverage the power of JavaScript right inside the template of your component and describe what the UI of your application should look like. JSX under the hood will produce React elements. Like this div is a React element or a JSX element, and this h1 is itself a React element nested within this outer div. So let us head over to React.js docs and let me show you an example. Let me zoom this up. Here you can see we have a component, and it is not the same as the one that we saw in the previous video. This is a class component. You can see here we are using the class keyword to declare a class, just as we learned in JavaScript. And here we are extending from React.component, which is the base class from which every component inherits these special methods like render and more. Now each such JSX element, as you can see, under the hood will get converted to a call to React.createElement, as you can see in this example. And don't worry about this .props for now. We will see it in a later video. Just focus on the concept of JSX. So you can see that JSX is just a syntactical sugar over the React.createElement call, and you can even map this to a React.createElement call with the name of the component, which is hello, then the attribute that it takes and the corresponding value for it, and then if any text it holds or any children element that this component holds. But in this case, as you can see, we are having nothing. It's a self-closing element, so we are passing null. So this means anything that you can do with JSX can be done with plain JavaScript, but JSX makes your life much more easier, because writing these React.createElement function calls can soon become rather cumbersome, and therefore using JSX is way better than this. So now let us talk about some restrictions of JSX. Let's go back to the editor. First is that we should not use the class keyword in JSX code, since the class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript. Instead of that, we can make use of class name attribute on our JSX element. So if you want to give some class to the h1 element, you can say class name and set that to say hello. Now as I already told you, it seems we are writing HTML-ish code, but this is not HTML. It is JSX, a syntactical sugar over our HTML and JavaScript code, which gets converted to the code that browser can understand by one of our development tools. Now next important thing that beginners often make mistakes in understanding is that all JSX elements must have exactly one root element. So here you can see the div is the outer root element for this JSX element, and within this outer div I can nest more elements. So let us nest a p tag. Let us add some lorem ipsum to it, and let us go back to the browser to see what we get. So here you can see we are getting a h1 tag, then a p element sitting next to the h1 tag. Now what if I remove this outer root element? So let me comment this out, and you can see we are getting an error. So here it says parsing error. Adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Did you want a JSX fragment? So we can also use a JSX fragment to describe a root element that nests these two elements like this, and this represents a fragment. Let me remove this, and let us go back to the browser to see if it works or not. And you can see we are getting the h1 tag and the lorem ipsum text as well. So let us inspect, and if I click on this, you can see we are getting the h1 tag and the p tag, but here we are not getting any div, so it's something virtual. But if I use the div tag like this, now in the body tag you can see we are having a div that is nested within the root element where the app is getting rendered, and then within that we have the h1 tag and the p tag. So that was a small intro to fragments as well, and we will cover React fragments in a later video. So for now I will just stick to div. Now here you can see that app functional component is just a bare plain JavaScript function that is returning some JSX code. Let us see everything practically to understand more about JSX. So first let us define a variable, and I will name it as message, and set that to hello world. And let us give this div a class of app container. So for defining a class, we have to use this JSX attribute instead of using the class attribute, because we know that class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript. So app-container, and let us remove this class that we gave to this element as an example. Now right here, let us remove the text, and here what I will do is I will interpolate the variable message that we defined right here into our JSX element. So I will say curly braces and then the name of the variable like this. So here we are using the curly braces notation, and within that we are interpolating the variable message. So let us go back to the browser to see if it works or not. So here you can see we are getting the text hello world being rendered in the browser. Now within our outer div root element and next to the message that we rendered in the h1 tag, let us define a label and an input field. So I can say label, and this takes on an HTML for attribute instead of the for HTML attribute. And the reason for that is that within the JSX we do make use of JavaScript code, and for is a reserved keyword in JavaScript which we have used in the for loops if you remember. And then let us define an input field to which I will give a class name of player. Let us add here player, and let us give an ID of player to this input field, so player. So let us go back to our app.css file and define some styles here. So let me remove this first, app container. So let us select the container first, and here I will use the flexbox. So display as flex, align items center, justify content center, flex direction as column. Now let us style our input field which is having a class of player. Let us give this a padding of 5 pixels, a margin top of 20 pixels, and a border radius of 5 pixels. So border radius 5 pixels. So let us go back to the browser to see how it looks. Okay, so this looks good. Let us give some text to our label. So player name. Now within this curly braces, you can interpolate any variable. You can also embed JavaScript expressions right within this curly braces. So let us define a function to format the message which we are storing right here. So let me define a function format message, and I will pass this message text to the format message function like this. So format message, and here you can see we are embedding some JavaScript code within the curly braces. So this is a function, and let us define the function right here. So function format message, this takes on a message, and what I want to do is I want to remove this world text and instead replace it with React. So for that, let us say return message dot split, and I will split at the space character which is a separator. So we are splitting at the space character. So this will give us an array having exactly 2 elements, hello and world. And now let us extract this first element of this array that we get by saying 0. So now we have this hello only, and to this hello let us concat the string react like this. So let us go back to the browser to see if it works or not. So you can see we are getting hello React being rendered to our browser. Now lastly, let me show you how you can convert this JSX code to its under the hood version using React.createElement, which is not a recommended way, but just in case someone asks you how this code is interpreted by React, then you will be able to answer it with ease. So let me comment this out and let us convert this to a React.createElement version. React.createElement. So first we want to create this element which is having a class of app container. So we are creating a div element, and to specify the JSX attributes we need to pass an object, and here we will define the JSX attribute and its corresponding value, so app container. Now this takes on a children property as you can see here, and it is an array of React nodes. So within this div you can see we are having an h1 element, a label element, an input element, and a p element. So let us define an array of React elements. Now let us first define this h1 element as React.createElement. So we are creating a h1 element, this is not taking any JSX attributes, so I will set that to null. And then for the children property of this h1 element, or the text within this h1 element is this. So let us copy this, and here I will use the template strings and paste it like this. So React.createElement. So next to our h1 element we have the label element, and this takes on an HTML4 attribute, set that to player, and the text or the children property of this will take on this player name text. Then let us create next element, which is the input element that is sitting next to the label. So input element, and this takes on the type text, ID as player, class name as player. Now as we know that the input element is a self-closing tag, so here I will pass null, so it is not having any children being nested. It doesn't have anything being nested under it. Next we have the p tag, so React.createElement p, and this doesn't take any JSX attributes, so just the lorem ipsum text which will pass as the children of this p tag. And here the second attribute should be null because we are not having any JSX attribute sitting on this p element. So this is the React.createElement version of our JSX code. So let us go back to the browser to see what we get. So if I make a reload, you can see we are getting exactly same structure being rendered here. And if we examine this, you can see this works great. We're getting the h1 element, then the label element, the input element and p element. All of these are sitting adjacent to each other within the app container div that is nested within the div with an ID of root, where our entire application is getting rendered. So this was all about the video on JSX, where we learned what JSX is, how it is different from HTML, how we can interpolate variables and JavaScript expressions within curly braces. We also saw how some of the attributes that we know in HTML are expressed differently in JSX, like class name, HTML4 and more. In the next video we will start with some of the very important topics of React. So let's catch up in the next one.